From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Paul Mancano and Jon Meoli. John, I am a little hesitant to have you back on here live, considering the last time we were in here live, the computer crashed on us. Not figuratively crashed. It literally crashed down.
Literally fell. We were so excited talking about the Orioles bullpen that we almost damaged. I don't think we actually did damage, which is kind of appropriate for the Orioles bullpen. Like, got really dicey, and and then at the end it was all right.
Bruised but not broken.
Yeah, we inevitably did a metaphor.
Yeah. Well, if that happens again, we now know how to handle it, which is just to stick through it and not worry about it. Keep talking about baseball. That's what we're going to do today.
Just fix it in post.
Exactly.
Honestly, we could do that.
Fix it in post.
When I say we, I mean you.
Exactly. Well, we are here today to talk on this Monday afternoon about the Orioles' plan to activate infield/outfield prospect Connor Norby. We're also going to talk about the injuries to John Means and Tyler Wells and whether the O's could make a roster move, calling up a pitching prospect to replace one or both of those guys. But let's talk about Norby first and foremost. John, we don't yet know the corresponding move. That's the important thing to consider here. But we do know that Connor Norby will be activated. He's not just going to Toronto to have a nice vacation. The Orioles are going to have him on their 26-man roster. We can put two and two together and say Jorge Mateo was clunked in the back of the head by Cedric Mullins' bat in the batting circle yesterday. And so perhaps Jorge Mateo is headed to the IL with a concussion. But for right now, we just know that the 23, soon-to-be 24-year-old infielder is finally getting the opportunity that he has long been clamoring for.
Yeah, I don't know if it ended up being like 900-some plate appearance in AAA, but that's a lot. That's a lot. I was speaking to someone in the organization yesterday about what he's been working on, what he's been doing, and he's honestly, seems like he was at the refining point of his development. He was just trying to work on the little things that will make it when this moment came, he is ready to be the best version of himself. And I think that there's a difference between, people like us on the outside who have been following this minor league system and want to see these guys in the big leagues. You want to see them just like come up and you want them all up at once. It's impossible, but you want them all up at once. But the idea that in the beginning of June, in a season where the Orioles have had a lot of things go well, some things go badly, like the fact that something could happen to your starting second baseman and there's somebody like Connor Norby who just exists and is available to add is really it's a luxury. It's a really good thing. It's why you build the depth that they have. And I think this is a really this is one of those moments where you're like, all right, this is what we're doing this for.
Right. This is exactly what it is for. When everybody stays healthy and these prospects are blocked in AAA, you really wonder, are we wasting these guys' time? But now we're getting to see an opportunity here from Norby, who is hitting .286 with 9 homers. He's got 7 stolen bases and an .884 OPS in 51 AAA games. This is coming off the heels of a AAA season, which he played 138 AAA games. And the season before that, he played 9 AAA games. He has been marinating for an awfully long time. Last year in AAA, he hit .290 with an .842 OPS. So he has been hitting well during his time down in the minor leagues. He's a guy who hits for more power than I think you might expect, considering he's a second baseman and he's just 5'10". He's got 62 career minor league homers in 344 games. He has played the vast majority of his minor league games at second base, but that's not the case this year. He's being used more in the corner outfield. It's a position that they kind of attached to him later in his minor league career. If you had to guess as to where he will play the most part, and again, we don't know the corresponding move, but we can sort of guess that it's going to be Mateo. If it is Mateo, would you assume that Norby gets any playing time in the outfield, or it's strictly going to be second base?
I think there's probably a world where he could get some. I know there's been a lot of talk recently about, do the Orioles need more right-handed hitting outfield depth? I think that before Austin Hayes returned from the injured list, that was probably more of a pressing thing. Now he's been a lot better than he was in April, in May, and into this beginning part of June. So I'm not sure that there's any reason to take those at-bats away from him at this point. I think you could see Connor Norby in the outfield maybe, but I think this is, kind of a like-for-like replacement if this is Mateo. The Orioles did this a little bit last year, I believe, with Joey Ortiz. He came up and there was an instance where, there was a need and he was the guy who was able to be the like-for-like replacement for a right-handed hitting infielder and played the amount of time that particular role would have, and that was how he was introduced to the big leagues. And I think that having someone play a position they've only really started playing in the last year plus is in meaningful amounts in the big leagues is probably challenging, but you have somebody who is a second baseman and you might need a second baseman. So it seems pretty clear there.
It is funny you mentioned that because the Orioles did do that with their top prospect. Brand new position at second base for Jackson Holliday.
Yes.
That they introduced recently, but they did have him play there in the big leagues. But that does bring up a good point because when fans ask why is Connor Norby getting the call up and not Jackson Holliday, I think you can point to a few different factors. I think one of those is if it is Mateo, that's a right-handed hitter for a right-handed hitter. Mateo has obviously been playing a lot of second base so far this year. He's been doing a great job at it, by the way. You could also look at the fact that maybe they want Holliday to continue to work on things down in AAA before they give him a call back up. And also, maybe this is a shorter stint because if it is a concussion, I don't want to minimize the risk of that injury. That's still a very serious injury for athletes, but it tends to be a shorter IL stint when it is a concussion. That was what he was being checked out for. Mateo was being checked out for during Sunday's game. So if it is a concussion, you put the guy who you have there's less at stake when you call him up. Whereas for Holliday, I think they're really only going to call him back up if they're calling him back up for good this year.
Correct. Yeah. And we've seen kind of that like tiered system and almost how they treat guys and how those opportunities are dished out. You know, there's basically, I think Holliday would go on a list with like Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman as guys who are like, okay, cool, you're here and you're playing.
Which is why we were surprised that they sent him back down because they didn't do that with Adley or Gunnar.
Exactly. And then there's, you can go from Kyle Stowers to Taron Vavra to Joey Ortiz to Heston Kjerstad to Colton Cowser to some extent. Colton Cowser got a little bit of a longer look, but that was injury necessitated more so than just like, okay, cool, you're ready. I think that this being Connor Norby instead of Jackson Holliday has just a lot to do with the work that Jackson Holliday is doing. Like you mentioned, the platoon fit and the fact that it's kind of time. It's just kind of time. No matter what the role is, no matter who he's going on the roster for, like there's not going to be any downside, especially knowing how Connor Norby works and the way his process has developed in the minors. If he gets a little opportunity here to learn about the big leagues, like even if he spends, 7 of the next 9 weeks in Norfolk, he probably wouldn't want that, but he will have a new data set of things to work on and things to address and how big league pitchers attack him. And I think that'll be just as valuable as spending as anything else the Orioles could do at this point.
Yeah. You've talked a lot to Connor Norby when he has made his way up through the minor league system, somebody who has always been productive at every level and somebody who is in this class of prospects that was being blocked by other top prospects. He was just marinating down there in AAA without a real opportunity to come up to the big leagues, barring an injury like this. And he was pretty open in a lot of his conversations about how that's frustrating. He understands why he's not getting that opportunity, but also it does help to have other guys in that category playing alongside you. Kobe Mayo obviously is out with the fractured ribs, but he was in that category as well. What else could he prove down in AAA? Joey Ortiz, before he was traded, was in that same category. And it's good to see that he's getting this opportunity now for Norby, but it has been a long time coming. And I think you could say he was justifiably getting a little bit impatient.
Yeah. I would be terribly impatient. I would be the most impatient person in the world if I was in that position. And it's a credit to how the Orioles develop and train these guys and the types of people they draft too. I think that goes a long way towards this. Like there's a world where AAA is like a very, very unpleasant place. I think in a lot of organizations, it probably still is. I have no reason to believe that that's the case here. And guys like Connor Norby, if this was not going to like be a fun place to be in AAA, like that would be a person who that type of role is one that would be really challenging to be in. The person who thinks they should be in the big leagues. A lot of places in AAA, you have guys who think they should be in the big leagues and guys who were and still think they should be, and there's not a lot of good that can come of that. And here's someone who is taking the opportunity to work on every little thing possible so that when today comes, when he gets on that plane with a bunch of beat reporters, which I'm sure was really fun for him.
He had Nick Maton with him.
Yeah, yeah. So he had some friends. He had some friends. When you get on that plane, you know that you've done everything that you can, and you don't know what you're going to be getting into, but you know that you've done everything you can. You didn't waste a single day there, and I think that's going to be how Connor Norby walks into the clubhouse and eventually into the batter's box. That he did everything that he could with the resources available and the time available in AAA to make it so this is a good experience, and he is as ready as possible. And I think that's a testament to him.
Yeah, but being as ready as possible doesn't necessarily means he's going to come up and succeed right away. We've seen many prospects in this Orioles system put up video game numbers down in AAA and then come up and struggle a little bit. But I think there is quite a good track record when it comes to this Orioles farm system developing hitters like this. And even the guys who are on the third and fourth tiers have come up and still done pretty well. I mean, Darell Hernandez was traded in the Cole Irvin trade. He was up in the big leagues this year with Oakland at 22 years old. He was the Orioles' number 16 prospect when he was traded. Joey Ortiz, number 8 prospect. He was a top 100 prospect at one point, but now with Milwaukee, he is leading all the rookies in F-WAR. So he is successful. So this Orioles system produces very good hitters. And I think it's safe to say that even though Connor Norby is not in the top 100, there's still a very, very good chance that he is a successful big leaguer. Maybe not now, but over the course of his career.
Exactly. And I think you can look at, cases like Kyle Stowers too, guys who come up and have these uncertain roles and are here to do a job. And it might not be the job they were doing in Norfolk, but eventually, the more chances you take and the more chances you get and the better you get at adapting to the roles that you're going to be in, the more chances you have to solidify yourself. I think there's a world. I think the Orioles would love to be in a situation one day where they just have like 1 through 9, like written in pen every single day. And there's no platoons and there's no mixing and matching. And they just have a bunch of guys who are swing decision monsters and hit the ball hard in the air and hit lefties and righties. And I'm sure that would be great if that exists. In the meantime, like there are a lot of at-bats and opportunities every single day, and they aren't using a static roster to get it. And I think that once you get yourself into the mix, that's the only avenue to getting more. And
right.
This is the first step for that.
In terms of how much he's going to play, though, I think that's the big question, because we've seen the Orioles call up prospects who are not in that first tier, not the Adley, not the Gunnar, not the Holiday, guys like Heston Kjerstad who come up and do not play every day. I mean, Colton Cowser made the opening day roster. He did not play every day. How much do you expect Connor Norby to come up and play if it is Jorge Mateo that ends up on the IL? Is he going to play over Ramon Reyes?
I think he could. I think that you would pretty justified in playing them equally, at least at the start. The answer to the question is he'll play some. He's not going to. I think they'll probably do their best to try and figure out some different platoon type things and put guys in the best position to succeed. I think that is something that they have done, no matter if somebody's played a lot or some people, the best position to succeed is like, all right, you're batting third every single day, go get them.
Yeah.
Some people it's, certain pitchers and not even left, right, just stuff types that they can face. And I think that his track record in the minors is such that he deserves a chance to play to his strengths. And I think that the Orioles will have an opportunity to do that. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about like sitting here next Monday, if he has a dozen, 15 plate appearances, like that's more than 5 or 6. So that would be pretty good if that's the case.
It would. Is it good enough? Is it enough to appease Orioles fans? I say no. But yeah, that's impossible.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how big of a vote they get on such a thing.
I'd say 0.
Yeah, I would say 0 too. I was trying to be polite. I think it's going to be 0 vote for that. And like, I understand that completely. Like, you want to see these guys play. I'm not sure just putting somebody on the back burner who's been here a long time is something that these Orioles are going to do. They've had the opportunity to do that a lot for shiny new toys, and I don't think they've done it in any of the instances that they've had the chance to.
Right.
This could be the time that changes, or it could not.
Right. And you also do wonder if this is a short IL stint for a Mateo, that there will be enough opportunities for Connor Norby to prove anything. Just because we saw Joey Ortiz get the call up last year, he played in only 15 games and hit 212. Colton Cowser last year, like you said, a little bit more of an extended run, 26 games, hit 115. Both those guys are having great 2024 seasons. Now, they did work on a lot of things during the offseason, and maybe it was just they needed the first taste of big league ball and then to go back down and work on things in the meantime and come back up in 2024. Or if the Orioles had given them enough run last year, maybe they would have been able to figure things out and have a stronger second half. Jordan Westbrook is an example of somebody who came up, was impactful right away, and the Orioles continued to give opportunities to. But if Connor Norby comes up and, like Heston Kjerstad earlier this year, struggles in sporadic plate appearances, is that really a fair shot for him to show that he can be a regular big leaguer?
And that's something I wonder, not necessarily it's like to avoid the question. I wonder if that's part of how they prepare guys for these. One of you stood around guys' lockers and one of the fallback questions is like, other than like, how'd you find out? And like, who's going to be here is like, have you talked to the manager about your role yet? Which is like, it's just something you ask because you're standing there and you have to get these people talking a little bit.
And they always say, I'm ready to do whatever.
Yeah, I'm ready. They say, I haven't yet, and I'm ready to do whatever.
Yeah.
I look forward to meeting with them, and I'm ready to do whatever.
Exactly.
I do wonder if there's a part of these conversations now, and it's like, look, these next 2 weeks aren't going to define whether you're, whether you're a good big leaguer here, whether you're an all-star, whether you go on to play for 10 years, or these 10 days are the only. I do think that there's probably an element of expectation setting and kind of like preparing guys. Hey, look, if this doesn't, take every single moment you're here and soak it in and absorb it and learn from it and be ready to learn from it. And if this isn't the best 2 weeks you have on a baseball field in your entire life, like, just know that it's not going to be the last 2 weeks that you have on the baseball field with this team. Like, we are not going to be judging this. Like, go out there, let it rip, enjoy yourself, learn from it. And so I think that the idea of like, is it enough? Is it not enough? Like, you cannot judge somebody on a good 2 weeks or a bad 2 weeks, even if it is a good 2 weeks.
Right.
There's still 2 weeks after that could go poorly. And I think that Connor Norby is going to be in a position where if he takes his opportunities, they could lead to more opportunities, or they could lead to, whoever he's replacing coming back and him going back to Norfolk. It's just a delicate balance. And I'm not sure that viewing it in like, is this going to be enough is like even an answer we're going to get.
That's fair.
However it happens.
But let's go down that road. Let's say that it is a very good 2 weeks for Connor Norby. And in 2 weeks, whoever it is, Mateo, is ready to come back. And Ramon Urias is still hitting poorly. Now, he's hitting a little bit better than he did to start the year. You couldn't have asked for a worse start to the season from Ramon Urias, and he's doing better than that. But he's still not having a good season by just about any metric. Does that put the Orioles in a situation where they are saying we need to make room for Connor Norby to get more playing time, and we need to find a way to get rid of or find a trade partner for Ramon Urias?
Yeah, I think that if that's going to happen, it would be less about performance and more like roster wise. I'm thinking about like the Mike Baumann and like versus the optionable relievers conversation that happened a couple weeks ago, where you had to kind of get rid of Mike Baumann because you wanted to make sure you had relievers who could go up and down. The bench is pretty optionable at this point, but to have another piece, if you were taking somebody like Urias off the roster and putting someone like Connor Norby into that rotation mix, then you can have a very optionable roster. Then you have a lot of options to do.
But it's getting to that point. It's finding a spot for Urias.
Yes, it's finding a spot. And
I'll say the Baumann situation worked out perfectly, I think, from the Orioles' perspective. DFAing him and then still being able to trade him for a quality AAA catcher.
Yeah. I mean, that worked out. I think that the money attached to Ramon Urias, who's not making the minimum, is probably a detriment. And like, I think the Orioles, the reason he's been here as long as he has, and the reason he has the role and has survived some of the ups and downs, because they think highly of him and they value him at a high level. And it takes a lot, I think, for this organization to move on from somebody. I feel like I'm not answering any of these questions that you're asking, and I feel like this is like a strange thing to be talking about.
No, but it's good to talk about.
Yeah, it's just, I have like been prepared for any of those infielders, whether they be Mateo or Ramon Urias, to like to be sent on their merry way like so many times, and it just doesn't happen. And it's really hard to envision at this point what it will take other than it just happening. Like
Right.
once it happens, and until I guess it's hard for me to like forecast it at this point.
These are nuanced conversations.
Yeah.
And both of us have covered this front office since Mike Elias took over in late 2018. And we have learned consistently that the Orioles very much value players who have options. That's part of the reason that they acquire some of the guys that they do. I remember Cole Irvin, the trade for him, saying, well, he still has options left. That's a huge asset to them.
Yeah.
They clearly value some of the guys that they value, defensive ability and ability to move back and forth between different positions. Ramon Urias has that. And they are okay with not having the best 26 guys in their system on the 26-man roster because they value things like optionability, and because they try to keep, for somebody who doesn't have options, they try to keep that guy as long as they can, because they know that they are just letting talent walk out the door if they place them on waivers.
Yeah, and that's the part that I think is the motivator for all these. Like, if the choice is to have Ramon Urias and not, they will always choose to have him.
Right,
They will
but
always choose
not
to
all
keep
things
all
are
the
created
players.
equal.
They will
Yeah.
always choose to keep all the players that they can. And if
Right.
they have the opportunity to keep him, if that means like a Connor Norby, even if he's playing well, goes down, like there have been a lot of instances where that's happened. So,
Right.
so all we can do is kind of look at what has happened and let that inform what might happen. It's very interesting. It's almost like I feel like it sounds like I'm rooting against him, or like want like Connor Norby not to like take this chance. I just don't even know what it looks like to take a chance at this point, to just
Right.
like get to like ride out like 3 weeks in the lineup and like have like an 850 OPS. Like that would be fantastic for the Orioles, and that would mean the Orioles have to do something to ensure that can keep happening.
Right.
No matter how well he hits, if we're talking about second base only, I think that the second that Jorge Mateo can play second base based on how he defends, that's what Brandon Hyde will do.
Right.
So we're talking about things that are hard for me to like game out in my mind.
Yeah.
As you can obviously tell by me rambling.
No, yeah. I mean, there's a reason that guys like Urias and Mateo and Ryan McKenna survived as long as they did. It's because the Orioles see very specific roles for them. They have very specific things attached to their contracts that make it so that the Orioles are incentivized to keep them.
Yeah.
And it's not all things are created equal. It's not like, Ramon Urias not having any options, just it changes things. It changes the calculus. All right. Well, let's talk about the other moves that were made. And that would be the unfortunate news that the Orioles are losing 2 pitchers to elbow surgery. That's Tyler Wells. That's Jon Meoli. 2 guys who have already undergone Tommy John surgery earlier in their careers. I think the Jon Meoli news is especially brutal for him personally, because he's just months away from free agency, and because of the amount of time that he has missed over the course of his big league career, as he is headed towards what he hopes and what everybody hopes is a big payday in free agency. But he's now going to be missing, obviously, all of the 2024 season, 2024-5 offseason, and at least half of the 2025 season. I've seen it thrown around that the Orioles should consider signing him to an incentive-laden contract for 2025, maybe a 1-year deal that allows him to rehab with the team, and then maybe you get some starts from him at the end of the 2025 season. Is that too much of a risk to take on somebody who has already undergone Tommy John twice?
I don't think in a vacuum it's too much of a risk. I think that Jon Meoli, we've seen it. We saw it towards the end of last year. We saw it this year. Like when he's on the mound,
he's great.
It's really good. It's been really good for pretty much his entire career. So for us to say that, it wouldn't be worth it, it would be silly. I do think, and I think to bring this point home, like the free agents and the contracts and the real money that the Orioles have committed in the last few years has been on the opposite kind of thing. Kyle Gibson, there's not a lot of universes where he produces and gives the results that Jon Meoli could, but he was going to give the Orioles
He was
30
going to be
some
out
start.
there.
He was going to be out there. Jordan
Yeah.
Lyles was going to be out there. They knew exactly what they were getting with Adam Frazier.
Yeah.
They know exactly what they're getting with Craig Kimbrell. Like they seem to purposefully use their assets and their money so they know what they're getting in return.
Yeah.
So I think that John Means would be absolutely worth having that conversation with. I think that because that is true, other teams will want to do the same thing. And I think that there's probably going to be more of an appetite from other teams to give John Means more money for the potential of getting like 70 awesome innings over like 2 years than the Orioles will. Like other teams can value that at a higher level and they can pay that at a higher level. Now, I don't know if that's still the case in like a David Rubenstein world where the Orioles are not operating on a budget of like, here's what you get. Like it's not a lot, make it work. When that is what you're doing, you do make those, safe, like valued plays.
Yeah.
When you have more money, you can take more risks. How that scale goes, we have no idea. But I think that John Means will have a lot of those opportunities to get those kinds of contracts. And I think that as much as the Orioles will have a sentimental pull, like if I'm John Means, I'm taking whatever the best offer is.
Yeah.
And if the Orioles offer isn't the best, you say thank you and you go, you find somewhere else to live.
Right. And by the same token, the Orioles, if they have better options, shouldn't feel that they owe John Means a contract in that instance. He is a free agent. He is as open to negotiating with other teams as the Orioles should be open to replacing him with another free agent or guys that they have in house. Speaking of the guys that they have in house, the Orioles were looking at this daunting June in which they have one day off, and they were saying, let's go to a 6-man rotation. It'll be hunky-dory. And then injuries just totally wiped out that plan.
Yeah.
Now they are looking at a 5-man rotation. They're hoping that Dean Kramer is going to come back at some point during the month of June. It's what Mike Elias said the other day. But for the time being, they have Cole Irvin, Albert Suarez in the rotation as we speak. They have Cade Povich and they have Chase McDermott, a lefty and a righty down in AAA who have always been lumped together. They were quite around the same time. We just throw them in the same bag together.
Yeah.
But two guys who are 24, 25 years old, having good seasons, ERA in the 3s for AAA Norfolk. What do you think the chances are that the Orioles call up one of those two guys to add to the rotation just to get through at least the injury to Dean Kramer and a very difficult June?
I think there's a decent chance for it, honestly. I can't imagine that this rotation will be like static, just 5 guys ripping through like a month where they have one off day. That's really hard to envision.
Yeah.
There's not really that much long relief in the bullpen. If it's me, I am calling up one of them as a starter and stretching out the rotation because you don't really have. You can, I guess, move a Cole Irvin back to the bullpen. You can move Suarez back to the bullpen eventually. I think this team needs to preserve its starting depth, which is kind of limiting considering there are needs in the bullpen as well. But I think that the chance to get these guys some starts early, go through the growing pains that pretty much every starter the Orioles have called up have gone through in the last few years.
Definitely.
Get those, you don't want to say like, hey, go out there and like wear a bad start. It's okay. We're in a 6-man rotation. Like it'll be fine. Like that will be challenging on the bullpen. And I'm sure that's something they're weighing. Somebody like pitchers who have really good stuff and really good results when they throw that stuff in the zone and sometimes don't throw it in the zone. The idea when you're in a 6-man rotation with a short bullpen that's getting used a lot as it is and saying, okay, like we're going to have one of these guys start with the knowledge that like it might not be a long start.
Yeah.
That's challenging to go into a game in a series in a stretch like this, period. But I think it's close to time. Like you kind of need to see, and they've never operated this way, but like you do need to see if this is going to work with these guys.
Yeah.
Whether it's, if the stuff plays and you want to let them go reset back in AAA and have them up, as like bullpen weapons late in the season, like you just kind of got to see. You don't want to be finding out in August when you've kind of made some moves, maybe less moves than you would have made. You don't want to find out in August that like this might not work because there's nothing you can do at that point. This is a tough stretch to do it in, but I think this is a time to do it because of the stretch.
Yeah, it's funny because I think the Orioles have been especially cautious. They've been cautious with all their prospects, but especially so with pitching prospects. You mentioned DL Hall, Grayson Rodriguez, another guy that the Orioles were very cautious about bringing those guys up. If they didn't feel like they were ready to start games, they weren't starting games. And Grayson Rodriguez in his first season last year got a pretty short leash. If he was walking guys, if he was not giving the Orioles a chance to win a game, they were pulling him. That places a heck of a lot of pressure on a bullpen if somebody just has a blow-up start. If Cade Povich comes up and, the second start only goes an inning and a third, that could just create a massive domino effect for your bullpen. You never want to be in that situation. But you do get to see what you have. And if one of those guys pops off and shows that he can be in the rotation for the duration of the season, maybe that lessens your need at the trade deadline. And you say, we have enough starters to get through the rest of the season. Let's focus all our assets on the bullpen. If it is one of these two guys, Povich has been better, although this very same day that Mike Elias said, yeah, we're looking at Povich, maybe he could be coming up here and helping us, he put up his worst start of the season, 6 earned runs over 2 innings, over 3 innings, raised his ERA to 3.18. So still really good. McDermott has not been as good, and he has struggled a lot with walks, but he did have a very good start recently, just 1 earned run over 5 innings, lowered his ERA to a 3.81. Which of these two guys would you like to see?
Michael Elias made it seem like Povich was a little bit ahead in the organization's estimation, and I think that's probably fair based on this year.
Okay.
Chase McDermott was much better in 2023 towards the end of the season, getting used to AAA and making that adjustment. The automatic strike zone seemed to focus him in the strike zone. He has really good stuff in the zone. It's really hard to square him up. He has had the lowest batting average against of all minor league pitchers, if not the lowest, the second lowest. I don't remember what it specifically was, but really hard to square up when he is in the zone. I think Povich will be the first one. I think that would probably be fair. And I think that more so than I think that having both of them kind of spread out on the schedule, they are, there are a couple days in between them for a reason. I think that rotation is laid out in Norfolk pretty deliberately. It's going to be about need and lining that up and where they think they can have an opportunity to slide them in if they're going to do it. But I think that at this point, even though Povich had that start that he did after, he was kind of talked up as the next man up, I think that probably wouldn't change it too much.
Yeah. One being a lefty, one being a righty does give the Orioles more options, I think. And if it's, they decide to keep Cole Irvin in the rotation and go with the 6-man rotation, maybe you feel like you can bring up a righty and Chase McDermott more than you feel like we need to get a lefty in the rotation like Cade Povich?
Yeah. I think there's probably a balance there. I wonder if the fact that McDermott is a right-hander with a big fastball and ability to kick guys out, I wonder if you look at that and some of the historic walk rates, it's more volatile. I'm not going to go on any kind of years-long crusades about minor league walk rates, having experienced what we did with DL Hall. I'm just kind of done with that.
Yeah. So Felix Bautista even.
Yeah. And that's one example of it. And Hall the other way, which is all right, we'll see if he ends up starting. Work? Yeah. I wonder if there's more just McDermott can relieve, so we do that. But I think that's where the whole left right comes in. I'm not sure the Orioles need another lefty reliever in that sense, even though he can, his changeup is really good. He got a feel for it back this year, and that gives him a real weapon against righties. I'm talking about Povich. I think they would probably just go with quality, whoever they think is ready. If they think someone is ready and they need, I don't know how much to hand in this or any of that stuff. I just think it's good to have those options, like you were saying.
Definitely. John, you have a brand new newsletter. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, I wrote about these guys last week. It's called Inside the Dugout. We're in the process of getting number 3 written and produced. I was doing that before we started speaking. It's going to be a fun one. The banner over here is really making a push to deliver value to subscribers. It's a great thing. I believe it's worth doing. And one of those things is a subscriber only newsletter, Inside the Dugout. We're doing it once a week. It's free to subscribers. You sign up for it on the website, click through any of the links that we do that. I think it's really cool. I think it's a cool format, and it's funny because after I left the Baltimore Sun, I had a newsletter that wasn't a newsletter for 16 months, and now I kind of have to do that again. And it's interesting. It's a really fun way to write about the Orioles, and kind of change up the voice, change up the tone, and still do the types of things we want to. I teased the first one as like, you'll know what it's going to be. And it was just about like swing decisions, because that's what the Orioles like talk about. And I like to write about
swing school.
Yeah. Swing school. We're going to go back to swing school.
We
soon.
better. Yeah. Dylan Beavers.
Yeah. Dylan Beavers hitting some home runs now. You know, it's going to be a lot of the types of things that we write on a daily basis. Just in a different format. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's going well. I hope people keep subscribing. I understand it's doing okay.
Yeah,
I think it's doing pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, of course, read all of the stuff that John writes, that Danielle Allentuck writes. She is up in Toronto. I believe she just landed and got through customs behind Connor Norby. And Andy Koska at AF Koska, all the stuff that he's writing. John is at Jon Meoli on Twitter. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Read everything that all of these great writers have to offer on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe just $1 for 6 months. And of course, subscribe, rate, review, write us a good review on the Banner Baseball Show, and I will read it out here on the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will be back hopefully later this week. But in the meantime, we're getting ready for the potential debut of one Connor Norby.